Hello there guys, and before we get to the actual video, I just want to take a moment of your time to remind you that we do have an active giveaway happening on the channel. We are giving away Xbox One and Beats headphones. All you have to do to enter the giveaway is subscribe to my channel, subscribe to Trill Era channel who are sponsoring this giveaway for me, follow me and them on Instagram, and have this or any other of my videos shared at least on one of your social media accounts. And that's it. 3 simple steps will take you a minute to have a chance to win this wonderful Xbox and Beats headphones. Super easy to enter. All the links will be left in video description below to help you out do it quicker. And that's about it. I will be doing the draw live on this channel as soon as we reach 20,000 subscribers, so do not hesitate, hit that sub button, tell your friends, tell them to hit the sub button and follow us on Instagram, and perhaps you will be the lucky one to walk away with an Xbox One. Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video we're going to be talking about my masteries. So currently I don't have a single mastery point added anywhere, so we're going to start up with kind of selecting my mastery setup, which I typically use. Then we are going to spec into suicide masteries, and then we're going to respec back to kind of like original state to kind of also showcase how much does it cost to keep changing your masteries. So first things first, once we tip in our mastery window, I always start up with defense, because defense for me kind of always stays the same regardless whether I run suicides, whether I don't run suicides. I always pretty much use the same defense setup. I hardly ever change it. Only reasons I do slightly modify it, and that is add 2 extra points in my defense setup, mainly to unlock resonate, is if I have what's yours is mine path in AQ, where I do need to kind of inflict weakness debuffs on opponent on like a regular basis, so that helps there. Other than that, I just keep my main 18 points on defense, and for most part I just max out perfect block mastery. Now 2 points in salve, it's technically 1 point kind of wasted, but again, don't think that defense setups are like particularly too important. For most part, the main few things you want from your defense setup is max out perfect block mastery, max out recovery for your healing champs and general healing, and I like to max out my perfect block just because perfect block chance interacts with parry mastery, and the higher your perfect block chance, the longer is your parry stun. And where does it come most useful? Typically is in alliance war, because in alliance war you face off against opponents who always have limber maxed, so your parry stance are quite short. Perfect block mastery does help you increase your parry stance by a slight margin, but it's still helpful. But yeah, and then we max out willpower. So this is my base setup of 18 points on defense, and I always keep it like that. So as along the way, I'm also going to be noting the number of units I have left, so we're going to be able to calculate how much units we are using. So when it comes to my offensive setup, I always have like a simple bare bone structure that I like to use, and I like to have 1 point in courage, because it is a decent 10% extra boost for 1 mastery point whenever we dip below 50% of health, and in this game obviously that does happen fairly regularly, and I do think it's worth it. Then typically I like to only use 4 points in precision for most part, and the reason for it is because of diminishing returns, and honestly I hardly ever noticed any difference in my crit rate because of that 1 point. So for most part I just run it at 4. Occasionally I will put it at 5 if I do some like specific champion setups, but as of late I have been just using this one kind of basic setup for like quite a while now. So we do want to max out our cruelty for maximum crit damage. Now another mastery that I do like to have maxed at all times is despair, just because any champion pretty much in any given fight will inflict some debuffs, whether it's parry stun, whether it's something else. For most part you do end up debuffing opponents, and it does help if you're running debuff heavy champions, even if you're running champions like Quake, because let's say Quake stuns opponent frequently, places concussion on opponent frequently, and that 15% per debuff health mitigation does help quite a bit. Not to mention also it helps for your alliance war defenders, just because if your opponent happens to be running suicides, he starts off with 2 debuffs at least already, and that will immediately reduce his willpower heal, and he's going to be taking more damage from his suicides. Especially if he's still boosted, he's going to be losing his health much more rapidly. I also do typically like to keep deep wounds maxed, because there are many champions that do inflict bleed, and this is like a fairly solid way to extend their utility and duration. This is kind of my personal preference. It obviously depends what kind of champions you're using, but typically I just keep it there, because I do like playing Nick Fury, I do have maxed out Blade, I do play several other bleed champions, so it does come in handy. And for the most part, I just keep 1 point in my assassins. Occasionally I will max it if I have some specific need, but this is kind of like my bare bones structure for most part. Now we do need to deal with defense, and again, for most part, my defense is my proficiencies are fairly bare bone. I do max parry for that max damage reduction, for that max stun length. We do keep 1 point in limber for most part, 1 point in dexterity, because that's all I need, and and we max out stupefy, just because we all love extended stun duration. And that's it. That's 8 points in proficiencies. That is how I normally run and conduct myself. Right, and now that we have kind of like made our base setup, this is what I run with most of the time. Now, for instance, I'm going to be placing for Alliance War soon. So we're going to be setting up actually, so after, this is my initial setup done. This is like my base setup, right? So after the initial setup, I'm at 928, right? 928. And then we're going to add here Alliance War defense, right? Because it's important, because we do switch to defense, Alliance War defense, fairly frequently. So now, in order to do that, I typically just max out my limber. That's kind of like the main difference. So we do max out my limber from my base setup, which is fair enough, right? And that's it. I don't use the rest of the mastery points. I have 5 in this case left over, and I just keep them off because I don't particularly feel the need for them to be anywhere. So currently we're in 918 units then, and we're prepped to place Alliance War defense. That's awesome. However, now that I have placed my defense, let's say I'm going to be running Omega Red Ghost or Corvus or whatever, I want suicides on for my Alliance War attack. And now, in order to get to my basic suicide setup, I will recover the 12 points from my proficiencies. I will leave defense exactly the same, and I will not recover any points from offense either. What I will do is I will reapply it to my base setup. So you can see that we are trying to kind of be fairly economical with our units and our points, and we're actually kind of focusing on the things that we do find necessary the most. And then I'm not kind of using my points just for the sake of using my mastery points to kind of like to use all of them. But yeah, so now we're back to our original 8 points. And now here we are just adding our suicide zone. So now we are speccing, let's say, for Alliance War offense. And now we just need to max out Liquid Courage and Double Edge. And as we can see, this doesn't really kind of involve me moving about too many points. I just move the points that I have spare or I could easily get to. So currently we are on 878. Whoops, that's wrong. Need after spec to suicides. 878, perfect. And now we're gonna go back to my main setup. Let's say we want to take off our suicides, and we're gonna go return to what was our initial setup. So in this case, I do have to take off everything from my offense, and then we're gonna go back to whatever we had there before, and we are able to start like the cycle all over again. If we need, we can spec straight into suicides for very cheap. If we need, we can spec back to Alliance War defense setup for also very little amount of units. And that will kind of have pretty much completed like a full cycle there. If we want, once again, we can skip one step. That would save us even more units, but so now we just need to reapply our precision, cruelty, despair, deep wounds, and assassin basically. Also, I wanted to mention that keeping the points spare for whenever I feel that I want to add suicide masteries also lets me add mystic dispersion if I find it necessary. So instead of kind of like maxing out my limber, I can put some more points in proficiencies and then use everything I hold left over to max mystic dispersion. So this is kind of like the idea of setups that I am running my account on constantly, because I do have to change my mastery setups fairly frequently. I mean, I do have to change them whenever I set alliance war defense, and quite often I run champions that do enjoy running suicide masteries, and I like running suicide masteries. So yeah, I do change my masteries fairly frequently, probably at least like every other day. But yeah, so I typically obviously try to find as cheap way as possible for me to kind of accomplish what I want from my mastery setup. And once again, it's not about using every last mastery point you have. It's not about kind of like redoing everything perfect for something very specific. It's about having like the things that you need and trying to be as economical as you possibly can. So now we are at 808 units, right? So we started at 1032. However, that was when we had no mastery points anywhere. So our initial setup, we had 928. That should be kind of like our point where we're looking at. So we went from 928, then we made it suitable for alliance war defense, which is awesome. We only used 10 units for that. Then we needed to respec to suicides because we had placed defense. That cost us 878, 918. How much is that? 40 units. So only 40 units to put on our suicides. And then lastly, this 78 to kind of respec down from suicide. So that is like the costliest bit because we're redoing the largest amount of mastery points. But as we can see, changing masteries isn't like all that expensive. So from my initial setup, I changed my masteries twice and I returned back to my initial setup in 120 units, right? So we can type in from initial setup full circle 120 units. It's not bad. I don't think at least it's bad. I think it's fairly cheap. I think it's fairly economical. I think it's definitely affordable because if you think about it, 120 units every couple of days, that's less than what? That's basically 1/2 of cavalry crystal, less than that. So it's definitely not too expensive. And this is how my mastery setup looks like. So once again, typically I run only 8 points in proficiencies. My defense for most part stays at 18 points. Occasionally I bump it up to 20. If I do, I take 1 point out of parry. I run parry at 2 and that's it. I have an extra point spare here as well. And then I can do 20 in defense. But yeah, this is my offense and that's it. This is how my mastery setup looks like. That is how I change them frequently, and that is most importantly how I change them frequently and cheaply. I hope this video kind of helps at least some of you when it comes to kind of picking your mastery setups, maybe finding easier ways to redo your mastery setups for specific champions to kind of be a bit more flexible. And yeah, once again, 120 units to go from initial setup to alliance war defense setup to suicides back to initial setup. It's not bad. Doing that 3 times a week, it's basically like a single cavalry crystal. Now it's obviously not free, but it's definitely not something that everybody couldn't afford. You can definitely afford to do this even if you are not spending any money on game, if you're just grinding for units. 120 units every 2-3 days is not the end of the world, and this does offer you much more flexibility in what kind of content when you can tackle, and you can be kind of more free to play the way you want to play and optimize your like play time. If you grind a lot, you typically want suicides on a lot and so on. But anyways, that's gonna be me done rambling. I hope this video does help out some of you. If it did, hit that like button, hit that sub button, hit all the buttons, And don't forget to hit that bell icon as well to stay notified when I upload next. And I'm gonna catch you guys soon. Later.